IPMNation.com.
Living in a city, when you're in it, watch the people walk by. And if you listen real close, you can hear them talk about their lives. And some hate it, some love it, some are felt, some are just tired. These are the people in the neighborhood, they just trying to make it out right.
Good evening, everybody. This is Dr. John Rich, and you've reached Dr. John's Neighborhood. Well, I'm excited to continue to bring these broadcasts your way. This has been very meaningful for me to have an opportunity to share my experiences and share the kinds of things that I know to try to help people live better lives along the way. I will admit that I'm learning how to live a better life myself. One of the things that I'm going to be working on after my semester is over is trying to put together some webinars and do some videos that will be about primarily parenting, but really what's on my heart and my mind. And so I look forward to hearing from any of you out there who know anything about the following things. I need somebody who knows about video editing that might be able to provide their services around that. I also have an idea for an app that I want to create. And if there's anybody out there that knows anything about creating apps, I'd love to talk with you. It'd be a pretty simple app. The idea would be that people would sign up for a 30-day subscription. And so every day for those 30 days, you would receive a text with a very specific, concrete task or challenge that I would give you for your parenting. Every day you would wake up and here would be this text, and it would give you something to try to accomplish that day that I'm certain, because of the research that I'm familiar with, would be helpful to you in raising your children in the right direction. I know that most of the people out there who have children probably feel like they're pretty good parents, and so I want to make sure that it's clear that I don't by any means want to come across like I'm judging you or making you feel like you're a bad parent. I feel like in any area of life, if you want to be as best as you possibly can be, that you seek out the advice of people who study it frequently. And I do study this frequently. I'm thinking about, writing about, and studying the issue of parenting almost every single day. And I've been doing that for years. So don't take it the wrong way. This would be like taking a class with somebody about real estate if you didn't know anything about real estate. The suggestion wouldn't be, I'm better than you at real estate and you're a bad person. It would be, I know more about real estate because I've spent a lot of time doing it while you've spent a lot of your time doing something different. So same thing here. Get in touch with me at info@drjohnrich.com if you know anything about apps or video editing, or I'm starting to open my doors to people for parenting advice or conversations about life. At the moment, I'm not charging for those, so get in touch with me if you'd like to have a consultation. I'm excited about my guest today. My guest would like to not have her name connected to this. I'm not sure exactly why, but she does live in my neighborhood, and she works at a local funeral home. She's actually interning there. She's in the middle of a program, not in the middle, toward the end of a program where she's trying to become her own funeral director. And so right now she is interning at a local funeral home, And I thought that would be extremely interesting. I told her when we're about to talk that one of the questions that I wanted to ask her was, considering the fact that, especially in the U.S. culture, the topic of death is something that's considered absurdly taboo. I say absurdly because we're all going to die, and so it seems odd that 100% of us have this shared future that's coming, and yet it's a topic that is generally off the table, except for in the context of comedy. So, considering that most people want to avoid death, what is it that would bring a person to want to be around death and people who are grieving and mourning all the time? It seems like a weird thing, as I've had the similar kind of thought about people who want to be proctologists. I'm not sure why you would want to do that every single day. But hey, we need proctologists out there. I had my first prostate exam not too long ago. It's not something that was in my notes to talk about. I don't know why this is coming up, but I'd rather have a prostate exam done by somebody who's trained. Somebody who's trained to take a look at those kinds of things than somebody who just does it on the side as a hobby. Sorry. Oh, okay. I think that's funny. Anyway, so this woman is going to come on after the commercial break, and we're going to talk a little bit about the work that she does at the funeral home. She's going to walk us through the steps that a funeral director takes when they get a call that somebody's died, from the moment that they prep the car to drive over to the house or the nursing home or the hospital, wherever the body is located, all the way up through the service and the dealing with the body. We're also going to hear her talk a little bit about her opinion, which I didn't know was a controversial opinion, but apparently is, her opinion about how she thinks people should be buried or taken care of after they die. So it should be a pretty interesting conversation. What I want to talk about for the bit of time that we have available is the issue of death. And this is something that has been on my mind really on and off ever since my father died. My father died when I was 22 years old. I remember that I used to go to seminary, and I was at home with my parents on break from seminary for Christmas, and I had gotten sick. And so on Christmas Day, I stayed in bed. My family went to see my mother's father and her side of the family. We didn't really interact with my father's side for various reasons that I'm sure you can read about on my blog. They were not nice people, and some of them were actually not even in the local area, so that's another reason. So they went to see my mother's family, and I stayed at home. When they came back, my father woke me up, and he felt my head, and apparently I had a really high fever. So he helped me get into a lukewarm shower to try to lower the temperature. And I started feeling better within a couple days, but my father got my sickness. On January 2nd, just like a week later, I was on my way back to seminary. I was kind of old at the time to be giving my father a kiss. I mean, I don't really agree with that sentiment, but that was my feeling then, was, I'm a little old to be giving you a kiss, so I would just say bye, but there wasn't any affection. But on that particular day, January 2nd, 1992, I gave my father a kiss goodbye. I drove home to seminary, took about an hour and 45 minutes, And when I walked in the door, the phone was ringing. I picked it up to find out that my father had passed away while I was driving back. So I got back in the car and I went back and took on the role of handling the funeral and everything. And that was a really powerful moment in my life, as you might imagine. It really changed my perspective on a lot of things. For one, it changed my beliefs about an afterlife. I had accepted the idea of an afterlife up until that point, but I was really pretty shattered by it, and I felt betrayed by God that my father had died. I know that that is a Western idea, to feel like death is something abnormal and something of a slap in the face as opposed to just a normal part of existence. But it was such a powerful loss for me that it really shook me to the core. And so ever since my father died, and I've thought about him, and I've wished that I could give him a call on the phone. I'm a Philadelphia Eagles fan. I wish that I could have gotten together with him to watch the Super Bowl. He was an Eagles fan his entire life and had never seen them win the Super Bowl. He saw them win the championship in 1960, but they never won a Super Bowl, and would have loved to share that with him. And he's not around to do that. And now things have kind of switched for me, because on May 24th, which is just about a month from now, I'm going to turn 50. I wonder if any of you out there recognize what this is. Listen to this real quick.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Sally O'Malley. I'm proud to say I'm 50 years old and not one of those gals who's afraid to hide her age, unlike some other gals, and I like to kick, stretch, and kick. I'm 50. 50 years old. 50 years old.
That's Sally O'Malley from Saturday Night Live. I would think that was 1999. And here I am, I'm 50, and guess what? I also like to kick and stretch and kick. And I've got the YouTube video that I was using paused on Sally O'Malley, who's in the middle of pulling up her pants. She had her pants pulled up really high and is always pulling them up. So that was always a pretty funny skit, even before I was approaching 50, but now I'm about to be 50. And so prior to recently, when I would think about death, I was thinking more about my father dying and adjusting to death and grieving and things like that. But now it's come upon me that I'm probably more than halfway done. How old am I going to live till? I don't know, 75? Hopefully, if something doesn't happen. I'm noticing that I'm living my life a lot more carefully than I used to. Because, I want to stick around. So here I am, and I'm about to turn 50, and I've got maybe 25, 30 years left to me. And so I'm having to adjust to that. There's a book that I'm reading right now that I think is pretty good, and this is the direction that I want to head. So it's a book called Dying, and it's a memoir by a woman named Cory Taylor, Cory Taylor. I'm not making any money by mentioning this or anything. This is just a book that I'm legitimately reading at the moment. And this is a book by a person who found out that she had cancer, and so she's writing about struggling along with that and what that's like to be dying. And within a short period of time of her publishing the book, let's see what it said, a couple months after this was published, she died. So it's a pretty powerful thing to have in your hand. Something where you know that the person is reflecting on the process of dying, and then it actually happened. And so there's a a quote here on page 42 that I want to mention. And so the idea here is that she's talking about the idea of regret. She's talking about how one of the things that crosses your mind when you know that the end is on its way. And incidentally, if you're reflecting on it, the end is on its way. Sorry to be Debbie Downer here, but the end is on the way. It's just a matter of when that's going to happen. It could happen today. It could happen next week. It could happen when I'm 75. It could happen. Well, I don't want to jinx it. I know you're not supposed to say things that might jinx outcomes or whatever. I don't really believe in that stuff, but I know my wife does, so I won't say anything further so that she doesn't get upset. But one of the things that happens when you realize that the end is on its way is you start thinking about the decisions that you made, and could I have made better decisions, and moments in your life where you had a crossroads and you had to pick between, in her case, moving to Paris or staying in Australia. She lived in Australia. Or maybe you had a moment in your life when you had to decide between staying with a particular boyfriend or girlfriend or leaving them. And you look back on it after some time has passed, and you can have feelings of regret about those. I don't necessarily have much regret in my life. I'd say that one of the times that I regret is I had an opportunity while in seminary to study abroad. I don't mean broad in the sense of a name for a woman, like I was going to study a particular woman. No, not study abroad like that, but study in another country. I had an opportunity. I could have gone to Singapore. I could have gone to Brazil. I could have gone to Costa Rica. And I turned it down. It was a full scholarship for me to go. I decided instead to stay in the United States. I did it because I had a woman that I was dating, and I thought that it was a good relationship and I didn't want to leave. I had plenty of professors who pulled me aside and told me that I was being stupid, that if that was going to be a relationship that was going to last, that it should be able to last 3 months, and that I should take the opportunity, and I didn't. And I look back on that with regret. That woman didn't turn out to be my wife. She didn't even turn out to be a very good relationship. So I do look on that with regret. But I don't have a lot of other regrets, because I encourage people to look at things the same way that I do, and that is that even the things that seem like they might have been mistakes or problems turn out later in life to be an important part of the story of how you got to where you ended up. And so provided you're happy with where things are in your life, or you're satisfied with where things are going, then all of those things that at the time looked like they were bad situations or mistakes, or maybe I should have done this instead of doing that, turn out to be important landmarks on the story that you have to tell. So she's talking about looking back on Paris. And she wishes that she had gone to Paris, but she has an insight that I think is important for all of us, and I'll end on this note. So she says on page 42, the problem with reverie, looking back with nostalgia on something in the past, the problem with reverie is that you always assume you know how the unlived life turns out. And it is always a better version of the life you've actually lived. That's true. So if I think about myself going to Costa Rica, I'm on the beach, I got my shirt off. I'm relaxing and enjoying various coconut flavored drinks, I guess. I'm surfing, and I'll tell you what, I'm the best surfer in Costa Rica when I'm looking back on it. And I'm learning great things, and everything is just phenomenal. Is that the way it would have turned out? Who knows? So the problem with reverie is you always assume you know how the unlived life turns out. And it's always a better version of the life you've actually lived. The other life is more significant and more purposeful. It's impossibly free of setbacks and mishaps. Yes, when I was in Costa Rica, there were no problems. Every day from sunup to sundown was amazing. This split between the dream and the reality can be the cause of intense dissatisfaction at times. But I am no longer plagued by restlessness. Now I see the life I've lived as the only life, a singularity, saturated with its own oneness. To envy the life of the alternative me, the one who went to Paris, or the one who became an expert in constitutional history of New South Wales, seems like the purest kind of folly. So what do I leave you with, listener? The idea that your life up until now has some meaning, it has some kind of a direction. Maybe you could take charge of that direction a little more fully, a little more consciously. But the past is the past, and today is today. It might be the last day that you have. So go out and live your life. Take advantage of the people who, unlike my father, are still alive. Give them a call. Tell them you love them. Think about the kinds of things that you would like your life to be about, and go out and carve that reality for yourself. We're going to go to commercial. When we come back, we're going to talk with the budding funeral director. Thanks for listening. Talk to you in a minute.
IPMNation.com.
And we're back. Thanks for sticking around. I'm here with our guest for this week. And unlike some of the other guests who are people in my neighborhood, you're actually my next door neighbor, like literally living next door to me. So
I see you every day.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately for you. So this is Claire. Say hi, Claire.
Hello.
All right. And so I wanted you to be on the show because you're in the middle of training for something that I think a lot of people would find quite intriguing. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
So I'm a recent graduate from mortuary school, which is a really fancy way of saying that I'm going to be a funeral director when I grow up.
When you grow up.
Yeah.
Right. Even though you're 40... No. Okay.
27, I think.
Uh-huh. That's it? Okay. All right. So you're around dead people all the time?
Yeah, I talk to them, brush their hair, paint their nails. We become very acquainted with one another rather quickly.
Do you talk to them?
Yeah.
Really?
Heck yeah.
Okay.
Tell them, girl, you got stuff underneath your nails. We need to clean that. Or, man, your hair's really naughty today, Mrs. So-and-so.
Uh-huh. Okay. That's odd. All right.
It keeps me the sanity level that I'm comfortable with.
I see. Yeah. You know, I used to work with developmentally disabled people, and it seems like anytime you're working with other people in an intense environment, there have to be ways to kind of make fun of the situation or to
cope with it.
cope with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I find myself doing that a lot.
Okay. All right. So I guess that leads me to the first question that I want to ask, which is, if you talk to most people, they want to stay as far away from the issue of dying as possible. We wake up in the morning and we go to work, and then we come home and we finish our day, and then we go to bed, and as much as we can keep busy and not think about the fact that
we're all gonna die and everybody we know is all gonna die
until you visit someone at a funeral.
Right, exactly. We don't want to be around that. We'd rather not think about it. And yet, so here you are, and you're saying to yourself, I want to do that 50, 60 hours a week. So what's wrong with you?
There's a lot. But I think that running away from death is actually, it's an American culture. And so if you look at European or Hispanic or even Asian cultures, they are much more into death than we are in America. We're very repressed in America. Nobody wants to talk about it or think about it. And when it does come knocking on our door, you have the people who are responsible and they say, I should go make my pre-arrangements so my kids don't deal with this. And then you have the customers who call you over the phone to make a payment. And you can mail me that paperwork. I'll see you in sometime. Okay, bye.
They don't want to even go to the funeral home.
No.
Right. And so I've heard this, that American culture has got a more denial around the issue of death. And so do you think, you've never done any funeral, well, I guess you've done funerals with people from other cultures then.
We do quite often, actually.
Yeah. Okay. And so do you see differences in how people handle the grieving process depending upon the cultures? Are there any observations you've made?
We have done, or I've participated in Hindu death rituals, mostly American, but there's different, like Catholic funerals are different than Methodist funerals.
Okay.
And then even subdividing from that, as silly as this sounds, white people are so often sad at funerals, and I find that the black culture really celebrates life.
Okay.
And it's like a party.
Okay. All right, so that's one observation that you've made. And so the more that people are expressing themselves, you feel like it's healthier. That's good. It's healthier. We talked actually, in a previous recording of the show that ended up getting damaged, where you were talking about men and women, some differences in how men and women grieve at funerals. So can you talk about that again?
Yes. Men, typically fathers or younger males that feel like they're head of household, will be more stoic and feel like they have to be a pillar of their family and they have to be strong for someone that they care about and not be emotional. And I find that women are very open with their emotions and that they find their strength by letting their emotions wreak havoc.
Okay. That sounds a lot like how, all the literature on how men and boys and girls are raised. Boys are raised to be tougher and to, get a hold of yourself and don't act like a girl and things like that.
But you should cry.
Well, so what about the father who's at the funeral and his son is sitting right next to him? Like, what if I cry? Then he's going to see that I'm not strong. Isn't that bad for him to see that his father can't control his emotions?
I think it's important for a father to show his vulnerability, especially emotionally, to his sons, so that they could bond and be sad together and grow and grieve healthy together and maybe make something beautiful out of that tragedy.
Yeah, I remember reflecting on how if the son is sitting there and the son is sad, but the father is acting tough, then maybe the son is going to feel pressure to also act tough. And now everybody's sitting there. What was your term for how that feels?
Emotionally constipated.
Emotionally constipated. So everybody's kind of held in. So it's interesting. And it seems like some of the things that you've said about what you do, you don't have a psychology degree, right?
No, I don't.
Right, but it seems like psychology is important in the job.
It's very important. It was 3 of our classes when I was going to school.
Oh, so tell me what those classes, what were they called and what did they teach you?
We learned the psychology of grief,
Okay.
We also had to take a sociology class so that we learned about all of the different cultures and how they grieve.
Okay.
And we also had a class called Death and Dying, and it was different aspects.
Did you read Kubler-Ross and that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, the stages of grief and all that stuff?
Yes, we did.
Okay.
Rather often.
Often? Oh, they that came up a number of times.
And I think all 3 classes.
All right. And so, what was the name of the first? The Psychology of Grief?
The Psychology of Grief.
So, do you remember anything from that class? What stands out for you from that class? I hope your professor isn't listening.
I know, right? Let me think. I don't know.
You don't know. Okay, well, that's fine. So
I started classes 4 years ago, John. I just now graduated.
I'm sorry. So, you graduated, you finished your schooling, and now you just have to put in more time, like training or interning, or what's left for you?
So I finished my finals in September, and I graduated in January, and I've left to take my national boards and a year of interning at a local funeral home.
Okay, and the same one where you work?
Yes.
Because right now you work at a funeral home here in Dover.
6 years now.
6 years.
Yeah.
So were you working there before you started your training?
I did. I walked in the door. A friend of mine's mother had passed away that I had been taking care of, and I told his dad that I didn't want to go for nursing or physician's assistant school anymore. I was tired of bonding with people who just died. And I said, I think I'm going to go back to funeral business. I'm still interested in it. And he said, I know a guy.
So you were involved in it before?
I was interested in being a funeral director before, but I had left it.
Okay.
I got accepted into mortuary school the week after a very intense funeral.
Got
personally.
It. Right. And then there was this pause in your life before you decided it's still calling to me or something.
Yeah. I went through 3 different majors before I went back to it. Yeah.
Wow. So, I know that you've talked in your life about how you've had a lot of loss in your life, right?
I have.
You even made the statement earlier that you feel like your life has kind of led you to being in this profession because of all the people that you've had to grieve. So can you tell us about, was it your great-grandmother was one of them, right? Was it that the first?
My great-grandmother was the first person that I knew that died. I was about 7 years old. And she would come down to visit for Easters and Christmases, and I loved her. She had this thick German accent, and she just smelled sweet like my great-grandma. And she passed away right around Christmas time, and I wanted to go to the funeral just so badly. And my parents said, no, you're too young, you can't go to a funeral.
Okay. Should children be allowed to go to funerals?
I think that children should be allowed to go to funerals if you're comfortable with talking about your child with death. And if your child's maturity level is there, you know that they're going to be aware of what's going on, and they'll be respectful and understand or be able to have that conversation with you for them to understand what's going on and get the same closure that you need.
Okay. So you're saying if you have a kid and the kid is just going to be playing around or running around in circles or whatever, that's just distracting for the other people.
And yourself, because you now not only have to take care of yourself and your own emotional needs,
right,
but now you have to worry about what other people think of your child running around, and maybe having to explain at some point to your child where they were when they were running around having that memory with their cousin.
Right. Another story that you told that I think is kind of cute and also in line with where you ended up was a story about a bunch of birds when you were growing up. What is that?
So my grandfather lives on a golf course, and somehow we always found dead birds underneath of this one tree. And I remember never having been to a funeral myself and telling my grandfather that we had to bury this bird and we had to say something about this bird. It was someone's mother or daughter or father and that it was important and we had to say something about them. And eventually we just lined the whole fence with little bird headstones and memories that we absolutely made up.
Uh-huh. And so what would you say at these little funerals? I mean, like, you were a good bird or something? What?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
You were a good bird, and you loved your bird family, and they loved you, too.
You would fly around, and then you got hit by a golf ball. And
poor little sparrow.
Right. Okay, well, that's pretty interesting. So the fact that you've been through all these experiences of loss, you had your great-grandmother, I know that you had someone you went to school with, and then you talked about, like, I don't even know the details, but you said, like, how many people that were close to you have died in your life without going into too many more details? How would you count that?
I'd say 7 people that I went to school with in the last 10 years have died. 3 of my grandparents passed away within 5 months of each other. There's been a lot. There's been a lot of people.
So that's 10 right there.
Yeah.
And then not to mention all the birds.
Yeah.
If you count the birds.
Oh, and my guinea pigs and my rabbit growing up. We had funerals for all them too. The stray dog that we took in.
So you were doing funerals way back before you were even licensed to do it. Is that going to be a cause for concern? Is the board going to...
They were home burials.
Okay, all right. So that's all right. Okay, yeah. So do you feel like going through all those losses, will that make you a bit better at your job as a funeral director?
It definitely allows me to cue off of my family's needs, and like, I know that they need water before they know that they need water. I know that they need to stop and take a break or a breather before they end up passing out, and they don't even know that they're about to pass out.
You've just seen it enough times and
been
through it enough times.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's shift just for a second, because I think that people would be pretty interested in learning about the process. So first of all, I was saying that I thought it would be good to go through from the moment you get the phone call that somebody's died all the way until whatever the last part where you're not seeing the family anymore. I don't know what that process is, but you said, first of all, that process is different depending upon whether the person died in a hospital or the person died in a hospice or the person died in a nursing home or whatever, as opposed to dying at their house. So what's the difference between going into a situation where it's in someone's house versus some of these other medical facilities?
Well, at a medical facility, there's someone there to guide the family on what they're going to do and what their next steps are. Whereas at home, someone's probably given you a list of things and people to call, but you're pretty much on your own until that hospice nurse or police officer or first responder comes knocking at your door because you've made this phone call.
Right. Yeah. I remember with my father that I saw him the day that he died. I saw him. I was going back to school. I gave him a kiss, which was unusual because I was 20-something at the time, and we didn't really give each other kisses anymore. But I felt like giving him a kiss. I gave him a kiss. It was right after the holidays. I guess that's why I felt more close or something. But anyway, I'm glad that happened.
Oh, yeah.
And then I drove home. This was before cell phones. I know young people like you don't understand that there was a time when if you were driving, nobody could get in touch with you, really.
No, I don't get that.
Oh, yeah, okay. So I drove back. It was like a 2-hour drive. And then I walked in and the phone was ringing. And then that's when I found out and I had to turn around and drive back. But it was my brother who said that he was sitting in the living room and he could hear this like gurgling exhale, which apparently is...
It's called a death rattle.
A death rattle. So he heard that and went in and discovered... And then they had to call, and then the cops came in. And
your poor brother. Oh my
brother,
gosh.
who was, I don't know how old at the time, 16 or 17, something like that.
That's
and then
intense.
my mother was there too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's just kind of the same thing as what you were talking about, is when all these people are showing up. Here's my brother and mother who, 5 minutes before that sound came from the bedroom, everything was exactly the way that it had been for years and years.
Yeah.
And then just like that, everything switches.
And you're just raw, emotionally, and you're in shock. I mean, some people can barely talk, and that's absolutely okay. But it puts you in a difficult situation when you're the person that's there.
Yeah.
And you have to make these phone calls.
So do you think that will happen to you? Like the next time, I'm not trying to do any bad luck on you here or
Knock
whatever.
on wood.
Right. But the next time that somebody dies, all these experiences you've had and now this profession that you're in, do you think that you'll be feeling your emotions and getting sad, or will it just be like, here we go, another one, get out the checklist? My
grandmother passed away this last January, and she and I got closer as I got older. She didn't like kids. My mother was living with her and taking care of her while she was home on hospice. And I just happened to have the day off of work, and my mom called the funeral home to tell them that my grandmother had passed away and I wasn't there. She waited 2 hours to call me and tell me that my grandmother had died, and I just barely beat the hearse getting there to pick my grandmother up. I lost my shit.
Okay.
And I started crying, and my coworkers walked in behind me, and I said, I'm not ready.
Right.
I'm not ready. They've never seen me cry. They had no idea what to do. So they went for a joyride in the hearse all loaded up.
All right, so that's, so I was thinking, going through it so many times, and it being a part of the profession, maybe that might harden you to it or something like that. But no, not really.
I'm like Zooey Deschanel. I cry at dead cats on the side of the road.
Do you? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so the process. So here we go. Now we've got a person who has just died in their home, and there's a phone call that comes to the funeral home where you work. Now what?
So we have to load up the hearse, and we get together several items that help us transport the body from the floor, the comforter, the recliner, the bed, wherever they are, onto our cot so that we can get them back to the funeral home.
Okay, so you need a cot.
Yes.
Okay. What else?
A pillow.
Right.
A sheet to cover the body with.
Okay.
And then a sheet to cover the cot with.
Okay, so you got the cot, you cover the cot, then you put the body on that cover, and then you put the cover over the body, and then for some unknown reason you have a pillow under the person's head even though they're not feeling anything.
It's more comforting for
nice.
Families. It looks a little bit nicer.
Right. So that's part of the psychology, right?
Yes.
Is that even though to somebody who's been doing this for 1,000,000 years and doesn't care about the feelings of the people involved, this is just another object that needs to be transported. You're doing things to try to be a comforting presence for people.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It gives the appearance of them sleeping, which is a very Christian belief. That when you die, you're just sleeping and you're waiting to be resurrected.
Okay.
And so that's why there's a pillow in the casket also. And when you close the casket, typically we'll have them cover up their loved one with a blanket.
Okay.
And they'll tuck them in, almost like you do your child before they go to bed. And so that also gives them another imagery of them sleeping.
How about that? Interesting. If you haven't been through the training, it never occurs to you that there's an entire system or
there's a whole thing going on behind the scenes.
Right. Okay, so you load up the hearse and you go to the house, and then I assume you storm in the front door. Anyone who's in your way, you say, "Get out of my way, I'm here to collect the body." Is that how it works?
Not quite.
Oh, okay.
We send the more professional person. We always go out on removals with 2 people up to the door without the cot. The second individual will stay in the hearse, and we'll go up and we'll talk to the next of kin, which is the closest family member.
Okay.
Find out what they're needing from us, if they would like us to cremate their loved one, if they would like us to embalm, and bury their loved one,
that's
do both.
Pretty early to ask that question.
It's necessary. The quicker that you embalm someone, the better preserved that they are, and the more like themselves they look.
Okay.
So it's a really important part of our job. Is
so
getting
does
that
the decaying process begin like almost immediately? Wow.
Absolutely. Right then.
Okay.
A little bit disturbing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you go in, and I guess first you greet them and you say sorry or something like that,
yes.
and then you say, how do you approach that question? Because now you're talking business, right?
Yeah, and it's a very personable type situation that you're walking into.
Yeah.
Everyone at that house is crying, upset.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them probably couldn't tell you their middle name. When you walk in, they're just so in shock.
Right.
And depending on their demeanor, we'll ask them to call us in the morning and we'll talk more.
Okay.
But if they have an idea, we had pre-arrangements and John wanted to be buried, then we know that we need to ask, and are you all right with us performing embalming on him so that you can have a viewing? It's a requirement by the Delaware state of law that if someone's in our care for 24 hours and not in a freezer or limited by religious reasons, that we have to embalm.
Okay. Even if they're going to be cremated?
If they're cremated, then they'll be put in our freezer. Oh. And then that's okay because there's a different right of disposition for that.
Okay. So does it feel odd to have to talk business with people who are going through grief?
It does, because I'm a very emotional person and I wouldn't want to talk business.
Right.
But I know that that's what has to be done so that we can have the best possible outcome for our families.
Right. Okay, so you're asking them the questions about which way they're going to go, right? There's a fork in the road immediately.
Yes.
We need to embalm or freeze before everything starts
to just go bad.
Okay. And then what? So then
Then we ask them where their loved one is.
Okay.
And we assess the best way to get in and out of the house with our cot, because that can be pretty tricky in itself. If it's upstairs, we can't use the cot.
Oh.
And so we have to use this bendable stretcher that we can almost accordion and slide underneath of the person with as little disruption of them as possible. And then
because then when you're going down the steps, the body's not gonna slide off, or
no.
Is that the issue?
That's the issue.
Okay.
Or the cot could tip over. Any number of things could just
and
go
nobody
bad.
wants to have to see that.
No, that would put a pretty bad image in your mind.
Drop the body, I think that would probably add to the grief.
Probably going to call another funeral home on us.
Well, that's true, right? Also a business reason, I guess, to do it. Yeah. So you go, you find the body, and then you just take it out, and then you leave, or then do you go back in to say a couple words before you head out? Or
we go back up to them, and we typically give them a business card and ask them to give us a call in the morning, so that we can get all the information for the death certificate, the obituary, if they'd like an obituary, and we can get them thinking about all the different things that are going on that we have on our list. To make their lives easier while they're going through this process and this emotional tragedy for themselves.
Right. Okay. And so I wasn't prepared to ask this question, but now I want to know. Like, you see these commercials where they say the average funeral costs over $8,000 or whatever. So what's the average cost for, how much does it cost you guys?
I don't talk numbers.
Oh,
I don't know anything.
You don't even know?
No.
Okay.
And I actually can't quote you anything without me having a price list present. That's a national law.
Okay. So So it's a big secret.
It is a big secret.
But you are going to have to know that, right? When you're finished your training, you're going to go out on your own, I guess? And
it's kind of crazy, but ethically and what I'm doing professionally don't quite match up. I don't want to be a salesman. I don't want to sell caskets.
Okay.
I don't think that that people should be embalmed.
Oh, all right. Why is that?
Pretty crazy, isn't it?
Okay. Well, that's very interesting. I didn't know that. So tell me about that. Is this a controversial opinion in your field?
It is.
Okay. So why don't you think they should be embalmed?
Well, it's polluting our country.
Is it?
There's a lot of very cancerous chemicals that go into embalming fluid.
Okay.
And they're not toxic to our families, but the decomposition of the body within our soil. The fact that our concrete vaults are taking up so much space. In the state of New York, I think there's more dead than there are alive, and that's saying something. And it's bad for myself as an embalmer to be exposed to the gases that are released while I'm embalming.
I see.
So I like my body, and I like to take care of it, so I prefer not to have to embalm, but I also don't agree with cremation either.
Oh, so what do you want us to do?
Green burials.
Okay. What's that?
A green burial would be like what the Jewish faith does, or Muslims, where you would just wash the body, and it's actually a very closed, private ceremony. And then they wrap them in cotton or a biodegradable cloth and put them right in the ground.
But I thought that the whole idea was that you weren't allowed to bury somebody in your backyard because that was bad. Somehow it was contaminating something or other, right? Is that just a lie from the funeral director industry?
I'm gonna say it's the casket companies, but
okay.
You are allowed to have a cemetery on your own property.
Okay.
It's just frowned upon, and it's difficult because you have to do all this paperwork with the state to alert them that there's been a death, and if you don't have a funeral director or someone who knows what to do,
right,
it's a very emotionally burdening process, and there's a lot of paperwork involved in death. Nobody ever talks about that.
Okay.
It can take you like 3+ years to get all the paperwork done and finish someone's estate.
And so the funeral director handles most of that paperwork, and then the family doesn't need to do it?
We file the paperwork through the state and Social Security and any of your health or life insurance, if you so choose to have them pay us, which helps you in the long run also, because then you don't have to worry about paying for the funeral or paying the taxes on whatever life insurance.
So are you trying to tell me that you're going through this program? You've like taken this in an entirely different direction now. You're going through this program where they're teaching you all this stuff that you actually don't think is the right way to go.
Yeah.
And when you finish up, are you planning on opening your own business and doing green burials?
I'm hoping to. I've got to figure out how to get the startup capital. But I can't be a funeral director and own a cemetery.
Oh.
I know. So I can't actively do the job that I do now, that I really love, helping people and taking care of them while they're at their funerals, and own a cemetery and do what I think that people should do.
Not even as a corporate entity, like one corporate entity is the one that does the funeral director and another corporate entity does the
A funeral
cemetery.
home cannot be directly linked to a cemetery. It's viewed as a monopoly.
Huh.
I know.
Okay.
But we can have a crematorium.
Right.
That's okay.
Yeah. That sounds like anti-hippie kind of, right?
I know.
We don't like anything that the hippies would like.
No.
Are you kind of like a hippie?
Yes.
You're kind of a hippie, right? All right. Well, that's really interesting. So what are you going to do? You got to pick one then, is what you're saying.
I do.
The one side, you can be an advocate for green burials, but then you're not going to get all of the interaction with the people that you like. The other side, you're going to interact with the people, but you're going to be disposing of bodies in ways that are against your ethics.
Yeah.
Huh.
I'm in a serious moral dilemma.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if you're out there and you have an opinion about it, get in touch with me, info@drjohnrich.com, and I'll pass the message on to Claire. Maybe
help me sort out my life.
Yeah. What is she going to do? What would you do? Here you've got, this isn't a moral dilemma like she has to pick the thing that she thinks is right, but it doesn't pay as much, or the thing that she knows is wrong, but she'll make more money. This is a matter of like both sides have something to them, right? This is one of those fuzzy ethical dilemmas where neither of them are the best case scenario.
No, it's not warm and fuzzy at all.
And the government is stopping you from having what you want.
From living out my dreams.
Oh, my God. I can't believe it.
I know.
Well, we are actually a little over time, which is okay. But, let's try to end this in a positive way. So, as somebody who's seen people die and people go through grief, any message out there for the living? What might you say for all of us who, at some point, we're all going to experience the death of other people and then, of course, our own death, but once that happens, then it's all over. So
yeah, there's no feels on that one for you.
Right.
I would tell people that everyone mourns and grieves differently, and that it's okay to have your own timeline. A lot of people who haven't experienced intense grief will tell you that things get better with time. But I don't think that's really true. I think you learn to live with what you've lost, almost like a scar. It's fresh and it hurts, and you look at it and it's painful. But the longer that you have it, it's part of you. It's there, and you just get used to seeing it every day, and you understand that it's there, and you've just got to keep moving with your life. And
that's a good one. Did you make that up? That thought there?
I did.
The scar thing?
Yeah.
Because, as somebody who lost his father 20-some years ago now, occasionally he creeps into my mind, and it's painful to think about the fact that I can't call him or touch him or, anything like that.
Give him that kiss again.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So it's true that, a long time has passed, and I'm able to function in the world better than right afterwards, but the feeling of a combination of sadness and betrayal, almost, not betrayal on his part, but betrayal on life or God,
you lost
or something,
out.
right?
Your dad was taken from you.
Yeah. All right, so that's a little dark, right?
Yeah.
What about appreciating who's still here? Like, I remember earlier talking about your mother, and
she's my best friend. I have to keep her close. Something that I've learned through experiencing all the loss that I've gone through is that you have to appreciate what you have and who you have, and keep them close and feed those relationships while you have them, and make as many good memories as you can.
Yeah, because, literally everybody listening out there has people in their lives that are important to them, and it could be over at any point for any of them, right?
Yeah.
I know that sounds dark too, but
I'm
meaning it not to be dark. I'm meaning it more to be like, take advantage right now and enjoy the fact that they're still around right here before
anything happens.
Yeah. All right.
Turn what we know is going to happen into something positive.
Let's turn that frown upside down, or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, that was a great conversation, and I think it'll be pretty interesting to people. It was interesting to me, especially your big hippie stance about green burials and your career dilemma. I'll be anxious to find out which way you go.
There's an internet sensation, and she's actually released 2 books, named Caitlin Dougherty.
Okay.
And she used to be a crematory operator. And she decided that she wanted to look into funeral directing, and she found that everything that she wanted to do, she didn't need a funeral director license for. And so now she's an advocate for...
So she's just like a grief counselor or something like that? Or...
There's all kinds of names for them. You can be a death doula, you can be a grief counselor.
Okay.
There's other ones. And you go through like a 40-hour certification, and bam, boom, you're certified.
And so does your place deal with any of those people? No, you handle everything.
Yeah,
but some funeral directors might, in certain situations, say, hey, we're going to get you in touch with someone that you can talk to, or something like that.
Yeah, we do put people in touch with grief counselors, but we don't have death doulas or celebrants. That's another one.
Celebrants.
Okay. They're people who can do weddings.
Okay.
Or funerals. And they're non-religious.
Right.
So if you were not a religious person, but you wanted someone to speak at your funeral, the funeral director would then call a celebrant. Or if you were having a tough time with hospice, your hospice nurse could call a death doula, and she would help guide you through the process of dying and help your family get together with you on a spiritual level so that it is
more closure, that kind of thing.
Before they die.
Huh. Oh, that's really interesting.
There's a lot of options.
Wow.
Yeah.
I want to talk with you about that. When I was, so people don't know this about me generally, but I used to be a minister. And in fact, I'm still ordained, so even though I didn't know the word was celebrant, I can marry and do funerals and stuff like that. So I have done that. Maybe you guys should put me on your list. But in my training, one of the things that they had you do is you had to be involved in like crisis counseling of some sort. And so I worked in an emergency room talking to people whose, that was a lot of death going on there. Somebody in their family just got in a motorcycle accident and you had to talk them through or whatever. And
I've been there.
Yeah.
And that person drove me crazy.
Huh. Okay.
She followed me around for like 4 hours. I was like, leave me alone.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Well, right. So part of the training is learning to pick up on the cues and not be there and assume that everybody wants you there. But, I mean, despite how hard that was for me to do, I always found that pretty meaningful. And, so that's pretty interesting. I think that even though I'm a research psychologist, the part of the minister job that involved the counseling and the talking to people, kind of like what you're saying, like that's the part about that job which I don't do anymore and wouldn't want to go back to. That's the part that I miss, is being able to connect with people, especially when they're going through a hard time.
Yeah.
So that's pretty interesting. All right. Well, I'm not sure how you're supposed to end something like this, but we are at 40 minutes instead of 30 like we're supposed to be. And that's just because Claire is a babble mouth and,
I talk way too much.
No, you don't. That was really interesting and really great, and I'm thankful that you're here. And so, okay, everybody, I'll catch you next week. Thanks for listening.
Living in a city, when you're in it, watch the people walk by. And if you listen real close, you can hear them talk about their lives. And some hate it, some love it, some are felt, some are just tired. These are the people in the neighborhood, they just trying to make it out right. See, she never wanna be a new IPMNation.com